All right, today we are going to talk about something that is near and dear to me. And it's really, we're going to have this whole conversation around being yourself. And I have a guest from Alberta, Canada by the name of Rob Riopel. Rob is an author, an app designer, and a serial entrepreneur. He wrote a book called Success Left a Clue. He's got another book coming out next year called The Authority Key. I believe, I hope I didn't just hack that, Rob. You just told me it's The Authority Key, correct?
Correct.
All right. So that comes out next year. I'll let him kind of talk a little bit about that. But today, Rob is here really. We're going to talk about all sorts of things, but primarily how to live with passion by being yourself. He came up with the topic. We're going to see where this thing goes. So Rob, thanks for being here today.
David, my pleasure. And I do love that because I sign every autograph and that I do for my book, and every email ends the same way. Always live with passion. Because to me, passion's a favorite word in the world. And that's what I believe is lacking for a lot of people. They get caught up doing what they think they have to do or what they should do. And when you can actually ignite in them that it's possible to live your passion and have an amazing life at the same time and make money at the same time, all of a sudden it seems to be a foreign concept that when they finally get it, they're like, really? I can do that? Yep. I can wake up in the morning and go, oh, instead of waking up in the morning going, oh crap, here goes another day.
But you came from humble beginnings. This whole concept of living that way when you maybe didn't come from that sometimes can feel like that's not even possible. That's for somebody else. I live in the real world, and that's not how life is. So talk a little bit about your upbringing, where you came from, and then how you got to this place mentally.
Yeah, well, and that's it. Growing up, my parents were giving me a couple messages. One message was that you can do whatever you put your mind to, Robert. You absolutely can do it. But then that's what they were saying to me. But then what I was watching is because I come from a very poor family, youngest of 4 kids. My parents were always having to move just to keep working to support the family. So in the beginning, I was never in a school for more than like 6 months at a time before we were moving again. And so here we are. I'm hearing them say you can do whatever you put your mind to, but I'm watching and modeling them working their butts off. But the one thing that I was taught growing up was, here's the box. Don't question the box. In fact, don't even try to think outside the box. Just this is the way you do things. And when it comes to work, even if you don't like the job, you do the job if it's supporting your family. And if it has any kind of security, that's important. And so, yeah, I started working young. I've always been an entrepreneur. This will probably scare your audience because at 11 years old, my summer job, I was babysitting 3 kids 8 hours a day for 5 days a week. One was a baby in diapers that I was changing and having to make lunch and have dinner ready for when the parents came home. At 11 years old, I was responsible for 3 kids.
Were these family members or friends?
No, they were, we lived in townhouses, and it was a couple across from us that my parents knew, and they both had to work, and they're like, we need someone to take care of our kids because we can't afford to pay for daycare and stuff. I look back and I go, who in their right mind? Well, I was an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
But I ended up doing it.
And right? You knew how to change a diaper. I didn't know how to change a diaper until I had my own kids. You know how to do that at 11, and you willingly did it.
Yeah, right. That's the part. Willingly is like, because I liked money. Let's just put it that way. I liked money. So of course I was going to do that.
Yeah.
And actually it was $40 a week.
So $40 a week, you took care of 3 kids all day long. And that was this because you needed the money, wanted the money, or you would just, your parents said, hey, you got to get out there and work?
A bit of both, because if you wanted something, you had to go and earn your own money for it. Yep. Because we barely scraped by. Like I say, my parents were working hard. And this was the first area we'd actually spent any amount of time in. Yep. And so we actually started to make friends. For me, because I'm a naturally shy person, people today, they're like, you've been on stage in front of thousands of people. What do you mean you're shy? Yeah, I'm shy. And I hide it sometimes by being outgoing. Yep. And as a child, that's kind of what I had to do, because when we'd come to a new area, I didn't know how long we were going to be there. So I wanted to make friends quickly. And I'll tell you, David, I did some ridiculous things just to make friends, because I think what scared me more than not having friends was being by myself, not having friends. And so I would do some crazy stuff. And so this area, like I said, it's 2 sets of row housing. It's funny. I live back in the kind of the area now of where I grew up for the most part when we finally settled down. And it wasn't until my wife and I moved back to this part of the province that we realized the area we were living in, I was living in as a kid, was the wrong side of the tracks in the city. To me, it was just a normal way of being. So I grew up being that entrepreneur, but it was also, it was okay to work and work hard as long as you didn't go too far out on that. And here's an example. Getting a couple of years older, in Canada, we have something called the cadet organization. And it's tied kind of to the armed forces. You have Sea Cadets for the Navy, Air Cadets for the Air Force, Army Cadets for the Army. As you can see, they're very creative with the names. And I joined Sea Cadets because I loved being able to have a weekly place to go to. And in the summers, I was away at summer camp, which was awesome. Yeah. And so in cadets, we were always having to do fundraising. And one of the things we did was bottles. We would go and do bottle drives. And my mind went, wow, look at the bottles we collected. So one day on a weekend, I went, I want some extra money. Why don't I go collect some bottles? And all day long, I just went around knocking on doors, and I was very honest about it. I said, I'm raising, I want some extra pocket money, so I'm collecting bottles if you happen to have any. And I did pretty good collecting bottles. Well, when I got home and I'd taken the bottles in, exchanged them on my own, everything like that, I got home and I have cash. My dad's like, where have you been all day? So I was out collecting bottles. And he lost it on me. He's like, what do you mean you were collecting bottles? I said, well, I wanted some extra money, so I thought I'd go collect bottles. He goes, you do that for charity. We don't need charity. And he made me give all the money away.
Oh my goodness.
And all of a sudden, here was a mindset shift right there. It's okay to help others, but you don't help yourself. And I didn't even realize that now growing up, I would work harder for other people than I would work for myself. Because it was for me, that's not what you do. You work for other people. And so those are the kind of messages I got growing up. And as I'm getting older, my wife and I'm very blessed, David, that in the cadet organization, we met when we were 13 through cadets, actually started dating when we were 16. We got married when we were 19. And we actually just celebrated our 32nd wedding anniversary. Now, Don't do the math. Don't do the math of how old I am.
Hey, I'm right behind you, man. Like literally, we're right there together.
And when we got married, we're both working, and all of a sudden I'm 21. I'm still a newlywed, and I get laid off from my third real job. A factory that I was working for, I thought I was going to work for them for 40 years, got shut down, and I started getting a complex. I'm like, is it me? It's like every company I start working for seems like they close. And so because in 1989, when I was laid off, we were in the middle of another oil bust. And in Alberta, with our oil, if oil prices are not good, our economy is terrible. And I couldn't find that real job. I put the suit, the shirt, the tie, the jacket on and went look for that real job. And I couldn't find one. I wanted to support my family. So I started delivering pizzas for Domino's Pizza because, again, you do whatever it takes to support your family. And because of my work ethic, I actually ended up a while later becoming a manager of a store. My wife became my assistant manager. And because she's the youngest of 5 children, raised by a single mom, she became my assistant manager. We started working hard, open to close 7 days a week, because that was our program. That's what we knew to do. And, we were doing that for about 1.5 years when all of a sudden that fateful kind of information came. Our franchisee came up to us and said, I've decided I'm done with Domino's Pizza. I'm selling the 2 stores. And I went into panic mode because here's my mind going, here we go again. And I'm thinking, okay, we're in Calgary. There's 7 other stores. We need to start phoning the other franchisees, find out who we can manage the store for. And my wife's like, why would we do that? We're qualified to be franchisees. Why don't we just buy the store? And I'm looking at her going, because we don't have any money? That's why we don't buy the store. Like, hello. And see, where I was taught to stay inside that box, my wife is like, what box? Let's think other ways. And so we started learning, how can you buy a business if you don't have any money? And I'll tell you, we made a lot of mistakes, David, a lot of mistakes, but we learned from every single one. And after about 4 months, we now knew what to say and what not to say. As an example for entrepreneurs, if you're buying a business, you never want to buy the business, you want to buy the assets. If you buy the business, you're buying all their possible problems.
Right.
You want to just buy the assets and start your own business. We're like, and here we are, we're in our bank frustrated. And we're sitting down with the bank manager who loved us because she had helped us buy our first house. She knew we were hardworking and she absolutely loved us. And in Alberta at that time, if you wanted to see a business manager at a bank, you had to know someone who knew someone who knew someone. And we're in her office and we're talking. She goes, how's it going with buying the store? And we're like, it's not going good. She goes, well, what's going on? I said, well, we just can't get the right connections. And she goes, well, have you talked to, and his name just went out of my head, but the bank business manager? And we're like, no, we can't even get a meeting with him. And she said, come with me. Now get this, I even today, I tell people, keep great relationships with anybody you do business with.
Yep.
Don't be the problem customer that they only hear from you when there's something wrong. Even today, I know all the bank tellers in my local branch. I know the account managers. I know the bank manager. And I love to go in personally just to say hi.
Yep.
Because she literally stood up, took us by the hand, walked us across the bank, knocked on his door, and said, I want to introduce you to Robert and Roxanne Riopel. They're two hardworking kids. They run a Domino's Pizza and they want to buy it. Take care of them. And because of that introduction, now, had we met him 4 months earlier, we probably would have blown it because we didn't know what to say. So everything's perfect. We sat down and he didn't give us the financing for our store. He actually gave us 100% financing for both the stores my franchisee had for sale. Domino's Pizza loves to talk about how the average age of a franchisee is 23 years of age. So we were the statistic back then. And 95% of them started as drivers, which like I did, because you could never just buy a franchise. You had to qualify to be a franchisee.
Yep.
And so that's the one statistic they love to tell people. The statistic they didn't like to tell was that the average new franchisee would go bankrupt within 6 months of buying their first store. And it's because it's what we learned, and thank goodness we were just too tenacious to have it happen, is we knew how to run a store, but we didn't know how to run a business. And there's a big difference there.
Now, were you just in survival mode? I mean, you didn't set out to be entrepreneurs. It just became kind of a, hey, look, this guy's bailing. We got to do something. Your wife said, I don't want to work for anybody else. Why don't we just do this? Was it just pure survival, or did you have?
That's exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly. See, because to me, if it was left to me by myself, I would be miserable in a job, but comfortable. But again, because my wife's not willing to let me play smaller than I am, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for her saying, no, there's something better. No, there's something better. And every time we hit a roadblock while we were trying to figure out how to buy the store, I'd want to quit. And she's like, no, we're not quitting. Yeah. And so, I was my own worst enemy. You talk about, and this is what is for most people, right? The self-doubt, and it's something that still plagues me today, David, is self-doubt. People ask me, okay, Robert, you've traveled all over the world. You've impacted hundreds of thousands of lives that you've trained personally. What's one of the things that, is holds you back? And I'm like, self-doubt. They're like, that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, why do you think I teach what I teach?
Right.
How's that saying go?
Doubt though related to what? What do you, where might you doubt yourself? Where somebody would say, what are you talking about?
I don't have the right education. I'm not good enough. See, I was a world-class people pleaser growing up. Being the youngest, to get my share of attention, I thought I had to please everybody. And until I learned, and this is where kind of you talk about the living with passion. To me today, my biggest belief is that the greatest gift anybody can give this planet is to be themselves.
But there's so many directions we could take this. So I agree with that 1,000%. And if you've gone through what you went through, you start to realize what you are and what you can be and where you limited yourself. Is there a time though where, well, maybe there were times in my life where it's like, be myself. I don't even like myself. Be myself. Like, I feel so limited. Being myself is boring, or being myself is annoying, or repelling, So did you ever go through any of those thoughts where it's like, I got to be myself? I mean, that's what I'm supposed to do, but I don't know that I like it.
Daily.
Well, really?
And think about it. Well, and this is because, and here's where most people stumble that I've realized. is they're trying to figure it out and be themselves on their own. I'm huge on surrounding myself with growth-minded people.
Yeah.
Now, notice I didn't say like-minded people.
Yep.
And what's interesting is I'm still a continuous learner.
Yep.
And so I'll never quit learning. And it wasn't until last year that one of my mentors gave me this paradigm shift. And basically what he said is, if you're surrounded by like-minded people and those people are complainers, you're going to be a complainer.
Right.
Whereas a growth-minded person is a person that will be there to pick you up when you fall.
Yep.
They'll be your greatest cheerleader when you're doing well.
Yep.
But the more importantly, they're the ones that are going to be willing to have the tough conversations with you.
Let's dig on that, because you couple things. You said you were a pleaser by nature as a younger person. Maybe you still battle it today. I know there are times where I have to battle that.
Yes.
You told a funny story in one of the videos I watched. I have the same experience, by the way. Somebody told you to listen or watch or whatever, some Tony Robbins video years ago, and you're like, yeah, I don't want. I told the story about this once back in the late 80s. No, it was early 90s. I happened to be at a gym, and there was a guy down the gym, and he was telling me about this guy, Tony Robbins. He's like, oh yeah, you got to listen to his tapes. It's going to change your life. And I'm like, really? He's like, oh yeah, you're going to make as much money as you want. You'll be able to do whatever you want. Just listen to his tapes. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the guy with the infomercials at like 2:00 in the morning. I can't quite figure out what he's telling us to do. He goes, I got the tapes. So I went home and I started listening to these things. And literally after like 2 of them, I'm like, wait a minute, I got to do what? And it was all about all this work you had to do. I'm like, I don't want to work for this stuff. I just want to have it. And I literally said, screw that. I'm not doing anything with it. But did you have a similar experience? And the reason I ask is, pleaser by nature, rejected the Tony Robbins thing. You probably just like, I just want things to work out. But underneath all that, and I'm sure we'll dig into this, is hard work, candid conversations, facing what's uncomfortable. You can't get there by motivating and pleasing. You've got to get there by saying, we got to do some real work here, right?
Yes. And see, you've just hit on one of the biggest differences between successful people and non. And I don't care who you are. Everybody has a little bit of self-doubt. Yep. And people go, because when I'm traveling around the world and I'm on stage, people go, Robert, I would love to do what you do. And then I say, great, then be willing to do what I do.
If you had to look at the vast majority of the population around the world, would you say that most people actually are comfortable with themselves or not?
They think they are because they're trying to cover up that they're not.
Okay. And where do you think, as a coach, you have to go to places with people that they won't go or they haven't gone to deal and get them to where they need to go or supposedly want to go? But if you had to like pick a couple of areas where people are just not good with themselves, they're covering it up, but they don't want to say it in public. Where are they covering up in your experience?
Yeah, it's about being busy. I don't have time. And, I've got a family, I've got this, I've got a job, I've got a business. And what I've learned is people are really good at being busy,
yep,
but they're not necessarily productive.
Yep.
And it's a big world of difference there. And right. So, one of the things I'll tell people when I'm working with them is, I'll never tell you creating success is easy. It takes hard work. Mm-hmm. But what you may not be realizing is you're working harder being unsuccessful. And it's just about changing and shifting your energy and becoming more productive. If you become good at being productive, the habit, and it all comes down to habits because we are creatures of habit. If you get in the habit of being productive, you will find that you are getting more done in less time, which also means you aren't ending up being as busy.
Yep.
And so as an example, I live by the calendar on my phone today, but I do my calendar a different way than most people. And if I can give some value to our audience, because if they, one of the biggest mindsets that holds people back from success that I've noticed, David, is that to go for success, my family life will pay the price. And so they don't realize subconsciously they will actually sabotage their own success because family's important. And guess what? Family is important. Absolutely. And they think it's all, for some reason, they've been conditioned to think it's all about the quantity of time they spend with their family. But if you look at it, and I'm going to ask a question to you like this, have you ever been talking to someone, David, and you may be there physically with them, but mentally their mind is somewhere else? Have you ever had a conversation like that?
Well, I like to think that I'm so compelling that it's impossible for them to go there, but of course,
Of
absolutely.
course. And so picture, here's what happens for most families. They're like, well, I'm spending time with the kids. I'm spending time with you. And it's like, yeah, it's like if you were my child, it'd be like, oh, David, good to see you. Dad's home. And hang on, check my phone. Yeah, I'll be right there. No, no, we'll get that. Right.
Yeah.
And they think that, but I was there.
Yeah.
They weren't there.
Well, that's that whole Cats in the Cradle song. It's haunting. When you think, I mean, I don't know how many people know the song anymore. That's dating myself.
It's dating us.
Yeah, it's dating us. But I mean, that whole song about the working dad that never had time for his son, and all of a sudden his son's grown up and he doesn't have time for his dad. It's right. But I think a lot of people are living that way. They don't realize it. You had talked earlier. I think you caught it early with Domino's, because you worked out. Was it 8 or 9 years of working really, really hard, but actually not getting financially ahead? At what point did you recognize that?
Well, it is 8 years in being franchisees. We're over $150,000 in debt, stressed out beyond belief. And that's when we actually, because my brother-in-law said, hey, here's these Tony Robbins cassette tapes. And I'm like, I don't need that. But now being stressed out and in debt, when we were introduced to a 3-day weekend of personal development, we were like, we need this.
Yep.
And one of the main reasons we were in debt is we weren't taking, we were trying to keep up with the Jones. Instant gratification.
Yep.
We're successful. We need all the toys.
Yep.
Right. So we were spending more than we were earning. And when we went into the weekend, we learned about why we spent money the way we did.
Yep.
And how to manage our money properly. But B, more importantly, we learned to take responsibility.
Yep.
Quit blaming other people for our financial situation.
And when you blaming other people in what regard? What were you? Because just trying to keep up with them?
No, that I gave them the money to invest and they lost my money. Oh. Yeah, but you gave them the money.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So taking responsibility for that, and it's not someone else's fault that I'm struggling. Yep. So, for a bad investment, whatever. And then we also learned some very specific skills that if we wanted to get out of debt, what we had to do. And unfortunately, the statistic is that only 3% of people will actually ever do something with new information that they've learned. And this is a North American statistic, which is unfortunate, right?
It's depressing.
And probably, look, the only reason we probably took action with what we learned is because we were so stressed out, something had to change.
Yeah. And
so we went, this weekend changed their life. And a lot of people go, how weekend changed my life? And then they go back to their old ways and do nothing with it.
Yep.
But I thought you said the weekend changed your life. Yeah, it was a great 3-day weekend. And
yeah.
Right.
You had to do something. You had to do something.
And again, that's where I've got to be clear with people is you have to do something, right?
Yep.
So we put into practice what we had learned. And that's why we were able to go from being $150,000 in debt to actually retired completely financially free 9 months later at the age of 32.
Mm-hmm.
And we made some hard decisions.
Yep.
We simplified our life. Like we had so many expenses of things that we wanted to have, but did we really need them in that moment?
Yep.
And it was like, if we sell this off, get rid of the expense, would it get us to financial freedom quicker? And we really dramatically looked at our life and made a lot of hard decisions. But today, because we did, now we have a lifestyle most people wish they could have. Yep. And that's the big key. And I wanted to come real back quickly to give your listeners the key on scheduling. Mm-hmm. See, when my wife and I do our calendar, the first thing we put on before anything else is what's called balance pieces. In finances, what's the wealth rule number 1? Pay yourself first. So why wouldn't we pay ourselves first with our time? See, what we'll do, and when I'm talking about in my 4 phases of life from my new book, is there's a phase called the pamper phase. Because you cannot give what you don't have. So if you're not taking care of you, how do you think you can take care of other people? Mm-hmm. And people are taught, well, that's selfish to take care of yourself. Great, be selfish.
Yep.
Because if you're willing to be selfish, and it's not like, well, this is me time, is we actually schedule in time for ourselves, time for each other, family. That all goes on our calendar first. Then the second thing we put in is called focus time. Writing my new book, I can say, oh, I'm going to the office, I'm going to write my book. 8 hours later, I'll come out and go, oh man, was I busy? but I didn't seem to write much on the book. What was I doing? Oh yeah, I was on social media. I was texting. I was checking emails. I was back on social media, and I wrote a little bit of the book. Right? Really, to stay focused, you can only stay focused on something for about an hour.
Okay.
And so I'll put it in my calendar, 10 to 11, write book. And when I come into my office for that hour, I am so productive because there's no emails, no nothing else. And everybody on my calendar knows if they see that I've blocked that time off, don't try and get a hold of me. You're not going to be able to.
Right.
And in that 1 hour being productive, it's busy. I get more done than 6 hours of being busy.
Yep.
And so also now you free up a ton of time. And because I've put my bounce time in first, when I'm with my wife, we're actually together. My mind's not somewhere else.
There are some people though, they identify with busy. They identify with it like there's nothing more important than my busyness. You know what I mean? Where their family is a clear second to their job and all the calls that they're going to make and all the clients that need to talk to them and all the customers that need them like yesterday. And they're not present. One other thing that in the calendar thing, by the way, I mean, about 20 years ago, it was probably about 19 years ago, somebody recommended that same thing to me. It was a game changer, not only using the calendar, but not negotiating it. It's right on the calendar. This is what's happening. So I'm not going to bail on this podcast recording, for example, because, oh, Rob, it's just a bad day. I'm so busy. I got a bag. No,
because your mind's going to always do that to you. There's 1,000 reasons why you shouldn't do it.
Well, if you let that be, but once you make it, if I'm going to make a commitment to you or you're going to make a commitment to me, we're just going to do it. We're just going to do it. It's in the calendar. It's not going to not happen. And I think that was the hardest thing. That's the hardest thing when I meet people and I train people as well. I coach people. There are some that are totally at the mercy of their busyness. The other thing that I keep going all over the place, but I relate to your debt. I used to be in the mortgage business as a young person. I got a job at a mortgage company and I was not overly productive there. But one of the things I needed to do was qualify people. When they needed a loan, they came to me and I verified income and credit and all that stuff. And at the time I had no money at all, literally maybe 20 to $50 to my name. But I had this job because I got to pay my car and school and all that stuff. But when I would run credit on people, what shocked me was it didn't matter whether they were doctors or pilots or attorneys. I could not get over the amount of debt the average person carried. And not only carried, they weren't paying it. And so, having to tell people that made, a couple $100,000 a year, you don't qualify for this loan or you don't qualify for this rate was very, very difficult. Because in my mind, I made $7 an hour. Who am I to tell them they can't? But they were so trapped by their spending habits. And it sounds to me like you experienced that as a younger person. So it's got to be overwhelming. But I remember sitting with one guy and he was late he had 3 car payments. He had a BMW, a Mercedes, and something else. And he was behind on his home payments and he wanted to refinance for a lower rate. And I told him I can't get you a lower rate. You don't pay your bills. And I said, you got to get rid of some of this debt. And he said, well, what should I do? I said, get rid of 2 of these cars, get rid of them. He said, I can't get rid of my cars. And so we couldn't help him and he didn't change. And he just maintained his bad credit. And I don't know whatever happened to the guy, but he was unwilling to make that change. So how do you get people to that place? How do you recognize when somebody's actually committed to do what you did?
They show up finally. So, and the way I'd answer that is I can only do what I do. And I realize I can't help everybody. I could, but not everybody's ready to be helped.
Yeah.
See, if they're not in the right mindset, they haven't hit their rock bottom or they haven't hit that turning point in their life where the decision is I'm ready now.
Yep.
No matter what I say, it's not going to help them.
Yep.
And so I quit trying to put my focus on trying to help everybody. And I decided to put my focus on helping those who are ready to be helped.
Do you have to fight the pleaser in you? This is why I ask. This is why I ask because
absolutely
you went through it. You went through being poor, starting a business, jacking up your debt, doubting yourself, wanting to quit. Your wife held you in there because she had a different way of thinking, but you actually went through it and it worked. And there's probably part of you that says, I want to teach other people how to do this. I can show you how to do this.
Well, that's actually how my whole career started, because when it worked for us, and I want people to understand, because they think changes have to be huge, but it's the subtlest little thing that can make all the difference.
Yep.
And I love the saying that says one step in the right direction is worth 1,000 years of thinking about it. Because when I started and I decided I was going to be a trainer, not I wanted to be, I was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I was at that point, no matter what, I'm going to do this. And my dream was, because if I could help one person do what my wife and I had done, it'd make it all worthwhile. So that's where my dream started. So when people are getting overwhelmed, it's understanding, first of all, you don't have to go from here to 1,000 steps ahead of yourself in an instant. Start with that first step and just start on the journey, right? And so being that people pleaser, it wasn't, and I'm now I'm full on being a student, and I'm learning from as many people as I can. And I went through, because I've done so much work on myself, David, that's the key, is people go, okay, you've trained around the world. Yes, but I'm still a student in every audience I can be in. Yep. Because I learned the more I work on me, the more I'm able to help other people. I went through a training called the Enlightenment Intensive. Mm-hmm. And in 3 days, I ended up figuring out the answer to one of the biggest questions that's always plagued me. Tell me who you are. What I realized is I'm me. I'm just me. And all of a sudden my whole life shifted, because it went from, because when you're you and you show up for you, either people are going to like you or they don't. Yep. And if they like you, that's awesome. Yep. If they don't, that's awesome. Because I had spent so much time and energy trying to get the people that wanted me to be different to like me. No wonder I was tired. No wonder I was struggling. But the moment I just truly became me and put my focus on the people who wanted to show up for me, who I was, not wanting me to change, I'm still amazed today, David, who shows up in my life and wants to get to know me. Because I'm still like, why do they like me? I still question that sometimes.
You still do. Really interesting.
I still do. And so the same paradigm shift came for with my audiences. I've had audiences where I start off with 1,000. By the time the third day is done, we're down to 600. Mm-hmm. And my choice is, do I put my energy to the 400? It just wasn't right for them at the moment. I don't know what's going on in their life. I don't know if they had other commitments. Or do I put my focus on the 600 people who stayed and played and participated? Yep. And when I do that, very quickly, you can identify the people that are ready to go to the next level.
So go back to being you. That was what was running through my head. I mean, that's kind of the only answer for any of us is who are you today? I mean, that's the answer. How often you run into people that they're fixed about that answer, because you 30 years ago is different than you today. Maybe values wise, you're the same person, but you know much more today. You think differently, you interpret differently. Yep. So you as a moving target, me, I should say, me equals moving target, right? So how many people, when you say living with passion starts with being yourself, misunderstand what that actually means? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. And I don't know the answer, because I guess I can't focus on that.
Yeah.
It again comes to some of the biggest surprises I get are people that maybe I thought wasn't getting anything out of what I was teaching them. Yeah. And all of a sudden they come up to me and they go, do you remember when you said this? Here's how it changed my life. So by me just doing what I do and being myself, I have no control over their interpretation of it. I have no control, and I want no control. And I guess I'm a big believer in that, and David, you've heard the saying, everything happens for a reason. And are you a believer in that statement?
I am.
Yeah. And a lot of people are, but did you know it's not the complete statement? And people go, what do you mean it's not complete? Well, the complete statement is everything happens for a reason. Yep. And that reason is there to serve me. Yep. And if you look at the whole statement, then you understand there's a lesson in everything. And for me, that's kind of was another paradigm shift, because, even if in the moment I don't understand why something's happening, maybe years later I go, oh, that's why that happened. One of the things I've come across on podcast interviews is the question of, if you could go back to Robert at 18 and give him some advice, what would that advice be? I would just tell him, just keep being you. And the reason is because everything I've gone through has made me who I am today. And so if I try to eliminate the negative, that's where some of my greatest growth came from. Yep. And the reason I can connect with audiences is because I've gone through what they're going through. And if I was just a perfect person up there, I've never had an issue, how much am I going to be able to really connect with them?
Well, the whole everything happens for a reason, and that reason at some level what serves me is I probably hack that a little bit. So there's an opportunity to learn something
Yes.
all the time, and as long as we stay open to the idea that it might suck, it might hurt, it might be sad, it might be tragic, whatever. What can be learned from that? How do I take something out of that and help somebody with it,
Yes.
or pass on some different way of looking at it, and not use it as an opportunity to just stop? Because sometimes things happen for a reason, and if that reason doesn't in the short term serve, there are a lot of people out there that they just stop growing in that moment.
They do. And that's the thing. And that's why, like, when I talk about, say, the four currencies of life as an example, the fourth currency is the experience, currency of experience. And that's what I spend a lot of time on now, because either people are so far in the future trying to figure out everything that should happen, how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, thinking they have some kind of control. Now, there's a cosmic joke for you. Or they're so far in the past, caught up on everything that's happened to them. And this happened to me and that happened to me. They forget to be present and experience the moment. And so when you can actually experience life, and bad things happen. But I'll tell you, some of the greatest gifts that a person has to give the world is if they can help someone maybe get through something that they went through. And if they can help the other person get through it with a little less pain, or maybe a little bit quicker, it could be a benefit that they can get from having had to experience it themselves. Like I've got a friend, and I'll tell you, I would highly recommend him to be on your podcast. He's got one of the best treatment centers in all of the US for teens at risk. And his number one goal is that he wants to keep teens from having to get to his center. So he works with the families and the teens, and everything he does is about preventing them, because they only get to his center if they're in severe addictions or they've attempted suicide a few times. That's when they end up at his facility, and the magic he does is phenomenal. And the reason he can do it is because he's gone through a life of addiction. He's gone through a lot of things, and he lived through it, and didn't know his daughter growing up because drugs were more important than his daughter. But now he has a phenomenal relationship with her, because when he realized what he was doing and he took ownership of it, and now everything he went through, that's the reason. Because if you sit down in front of a teen and you haven't experienced addictions and stuff, they're going to see the bullshit right through you. And so he's able to sit there and be real with them, and that's why he's effective. But of course, his goal is to have his center shut down because they don't need it.
Right. Ultimately, he wants to work his way out of a job. By getting ahead of it, and going back, and he's living his passion. He feels like he owes the world something. I owe the world this information. You can avoid this stuff in a lot of ways. I think you're doing the same thing. You've got a lot of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you whatever you went through, or whatever you felt like you didn't have, there's clearly energy in you, Rob. I mean, it's definitely there. But I think what you're saying is, look, anybody can be themselves, and that's where the passion comes from. If I'm reading you right, it's like once you get good with it, and I'm totally cool with myself, flaws and all.
Well, and
that's where the energy comes from.
I will tell everybody, I am another world-class thing I'm good at is I'm a world-class procrastinator. I procrastinate better than almost anyone. And I used to beat myself up over it. But then I went, and what good is it doing beating myself up? This is who I am. So how do I work with it? And so one of my quotes I ended up coming up with is, design your day in such a way that procrastination cannot play. So for me, I know if I have, and it's something you and I were talking about earlier in the interview, I will purposely make commitments to other people for interviews, calls, sessions first thing in the morning, because I know then I have to get up, because the moment I commit, I'm there.
You're in.
That's right. So I like this morning, I had a meeting at 6 a.m. Now, I don't always start that early, but I knew because of the time zone difference, they needed me on at 6 a.m. because they're in the Philippines. So it's 8 p.m. their time. So it's not a problem. I had my first call at 6 a.m. And so I'm up. And once I'm up, I'm up. But like yesterday, Sunday, I slept till noon. So instead of fighting that I'm a procrastinator, I work with it.
Yeah, and it sounds like you just weave it into your life. So I'm going to give you the last word on everything. So two questions. What do you want people to know? If there's one idea or something to think about or something for them to walk away with in your, like, what do you want them to know as a result of this conversation? And then on top of that, if they want to reach you directly or they want to connect with you directly, what's the best way to do that? So I'll leave it to you to bring us home.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's what you and I have been talking about. I believe the greatest gift you can give the world is to be yourself. And it's going to take courage. It absolutely will. But do it one step at a time. And then if people want to be able to reach out to me and connect with me, I am all over social media. But because you were so gracious, David, to have me on your podcast, I'd also love for them to be able to get access to my book, Success Left a Clue. It's an international bestseller where they can download the full digital copy, not just a couple chapters, full digital copy as our gift to them for taking their valuable time. See, you and I, we've been here having a great conversation. I've been learning from you as much as you may have learned from me because I love meeting amazing people. And I believe that your time is one of the most precious commodities you have. So your audience members that have actually taken their precious time to listen, I want to thank them for that because that means a lot to me. And so I'd love for them to be able to download the digital copy. I wrote it as a work manual so that there will be action steps to take. And I'll even say in it, did you do the last action? If not, stop reading right now, go back and do the action. And if they do, I promise, if they do the 6 steps and they do the action steps that I talk about, I promise their life will change.
Excellent. Hey, I thank you, Rob, for your time. I enjoyed the conversation, and I know everyone listens all the way through, so they will hear that. Thank you for being with me today. I really had fun.
My pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.